Welcome to the ESG Decoded podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Hsieh, and today I have Jonathan Colbert, VP of Marketing at Voltera. I'm excited to have Jonathan on the podcast because we're going to dive into EVs, but from a charging infrastructure point of view. Not that EV cars and all that stuff isn't cool, but this is, I think, somewhere that a topic we need to be thinking about, talking about, because we can have all these cool cars and fleets, but where are we going to charge them? And that's what we're going to speak to Jonathan about a little bit more. Jonathan and I met at Climate Camp 23 at UT Austin. So thank you, Longhorns, for connecting us. We were speakers on different panels. So I didn't at the same time. So I didn't get to listen to Jonathan's panel, unfortunately. So of course I'm like, afterwards, or I forget before or after I met Jonathan, I'm like, you have to come on the podcast and we have to talk. Anyways, Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk more about this side of the industry and not so much just cars, because it always gets back to cars.
Let's start a little bit. You've spent your career in this industry, and will you tell folks a little bit about, what you've been doing for the past decade or so?
Yeah, I actually had a roundabout way into the electric vehicle space. I ended up at Mercedes-Benz USA doing marketing, but before that, I worked in marketing. I was actually working at a company that does power tools and floor care products, and that company, we had kind of internal mantras around being a lithium-ion company, and I didn't even realize then that it would impact the rest of my career going forward. So was a little bit techie, got to flex that side there a little bit and learn about lithium and its impact in that space. And then ended up at Mercedes-Benz doing what we called campaign marketing for our volume vehicles. So we had about 6 models that we did a lot of creative around, evergreen creative throughout the year. So commercials, digital advertising, social media, those kind of things. And this opportunity came up to join this small team of 3 people named Project California. So I kind of left my marketing career behind, went into basically what was a business development team to just figure out, how do we roll out the next wave of electric vehicles, up or down? What do dealers need? What do our facilities need to do? What does headquarters need to do? And after about a year, we grew into a much larger team. We knew there was no way we could tackle all the challenges that were ahead there. And that new team, we were part of a global organization for Daimler named CASE. So that acronym standing for Connected, Autonomous, Shared Services, and Electric Vehicles specifically. So in that new team, I was responsible for charging and infrastructure for North America. So that meant dealership programs, facility programs, so think vehicle processing centers, headquarters facilities, and then also customer programs on the road and in home. How do you charge these vehicles? So in a roundabout way, it went from kind of lithium to vehicles from a marketing perspective into charging and infrastructure for North America for Daimler. Around that time, went back to school, went to Georgia Tech, wanted to take that MBA and really go to a small startup, something 30 person or less, maybe in the space in automotive or in technology, and ended up with Rivian Automotive. And it was one of the best decisions I've made. So literally went from the oldest car manufacturer to one of the newer ones and started off doing some product there. So what we call our level 2, so AC charging. So the portable charger that comes with both the R1S and the R1T, as well as the in-home, the public, and fleet charger. And on that team, I was fortunate enough to be one of the first folks on the energy and charging team there, but worked for a guy that's I'm working for again now at Terawatt. His name is Matt Horton. But worked there, did a quick stint at one of our competitors of Voltera doing business development. And then as of basically Q4 last year, I've been here at Voltera leading out marketing and go-to-market strategy. And what does Voltera do? We can kind of get into, but in a nutshell, we're providing charging for fleets.
And let's dive in a little bit about what makes Voltera different as well. Like, what is it offering that, when you say offering EV charging for fleets, that sounds, I don't know, demystify it for us.
Yeah. And I'm so happy you're giving me this platform, because I've been in the space for a little bit. And when I kind of glazed over is at Rivian, I started off doing product. Then I went into a business development role, really leading out one of the charging networks there. And what we did was we would sell the charging to different site hosts. And what's very different here at Voltera versus that model, which is very prevalent in the space, is that we go out, we'll buy land. So we'll site and develop the land, bring the power in with the utility, basically handle all of the charging and infrastructure or distributed energy resources that may be needed or necessary on site. And then we will lease out that site to a fleet, small to large, so class one vehicles and autonomous vehicle fleets, all the way up to heavy duty trucks and drayage fleets. Or they could pay per kilowatt hour. So if they're used to just paying for fuel and they want to just have a similar model, then they will accommodate that. But what's been more prevalent lately is just a lease to the end user. So the fleets can focus on being a fleet manager and managing their operations and not have to worry about the charging and also on-site operations. So we're providing, I kind of sold ourselves short with saying just charging, because we will manage all of the on-site operations for them. If they need a maintenance bay, if they need a car wash, they most likely are going to need restrooms and lounge facilities. We'll provide all of that for them and manage it.
What I think about is when we're talking about fleets, we're talking about hundreds of vehicles, and how do you charge them, keep them on the road, making sure that they can deliver when they need to be there, right? We all want our packages and things on time, but also do it in the most cost efficient way as well. And that's what I'm so curious about, how Voltera's business model works, because it sounds like you're able to find the right site selection, starting from the site selection. Will you tell us a little bit more about that and why that matters?
Yeah. And maybe before we jump into the actual siting and the site acquisition, one thing that is like the biggest, I would say, like prohibitor of going after a site or developing charging is the cost. So we take that CapEx burden off of the site host. And we wouldn't be able to do that without a strong backer. EQT is our private equity partner. They've pledged billions to this, and billions with a B. It will be necessary to spend billions of dollars for just our business alone, much less the industry at large. So the first part is we're willing to put the capital up, and that plays into our site acquisition strategy. And we'll go about it in a few different ways. One could be just purely thesis based. Like we work internally to scout the market, to think about like what's coming, whether it's trends in a metro around the types of fleets that are going there. Let's say autonomous vehicles are scaling up in a certain metro, for example, or it could be near a certain port. We know we need to have facilities to enable mass electrification. With the advanced clean fleets rule and the advanced clean truck ruling that's happened in California, we know we need to be at the port of Long Beach and in Oakland, for example. So we'll go out and we'll buy, and internally that will provide the largest returns, right? Because we're getting out in front of the curve and kind of beating our competition to a site. In addition to that, we'll work with customers, right? We'll either have customers where they want us to be the dedicated developer of sites for them, and we'll work with them and do that. Or we'll have sites and we kind of bring them back to them and say, hey, here's some sites that we have in development or are already ready to go. Would you like to be an off-taker on the site?
Can you give a sense of how many states or sites that you're involved in? Give us a sense of the scale, because I think depending on what city you live in, this may or may not touch you right now. It will in 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on where you are. If you're maybe in Long Beach, maybe you're in California, you might be seeing this happen faster than if you're somewhere else in the country.
As a marketing guy, we're in the midst now of going out and rolling out our launch plan site by site. What I can tell you is we are in metros from coast to coast. We're actively pursuing real estate, and part of our secret sauce is kind of our site acquisition. So we want to be mindful of when we do go out and say, here we are, here's where we've kind of put the flag in the ground. So right now we have an active site in Arizona. We're developing sites in Georgia, in California, and the Pacific Northwest, and kind of basically across the coast. Like Texas, for example, is a big hub for us. The amount of sites will be in the tens this year, and then we're kind of at the beginning of the hockey stick where we have to scale up pretty quickly. So although we have a team of folks that have been doing this for a long time and we're kind of industry vets, working with EQT and our leadership team, we are really making sure that we're mindful of the way we scale and how we scale. And in a sense, this is kind of the crawl before the walk and run phase in 2023. One caveat I will say is we're looking at 18 to 24 months easily for just power procurement on a site. So we know the sites we're buying today are sites that are going to go live in 2024 and 2025. So we're buying ahead. So that is helping to accelerate our efforts too, because we know we have to move quickly to be prepared for this influx of customers that's coming.
That sounds like a long time to me, but is that typical?
It's very typical.
Okay.
I've heard folks throw out the Empire State Building or other businesses that require a ton of energy across the year as an example. When we were at Climate Cap, we and I know you didn't see the panel that I was on, but I tried to bring it home to the team there, or to the students there, to understand like what we're talking about from a sense of scale. Our sites will be 10 megawatts plus easily. And if you think about what that means, I went and looked at the state records for the University of Texas at Austin, and on a yearly basis, they have like a daily capacity of around 18 megawatts. We could easily have a site that has 18 megawatts. And you're talking like a few acres of a site could have that. And we're working with utilities to say, like, if we could have it, we'd have it yesterday. We'd say, hey, can you unlock this capacity within the year? And they're just not built to handle that right now. The processes and the procedures are being scaled up to be able to accommodate, but it's not something that they've had to address. So to go back to that Empire State Building, you hear that a lot. It would be like saying, hey, we want to have an Empire State Building's worth of power and then some by the end of the year. And it's going to take some time, because if you think about what you would do in that typical timeline for a project like that, you'd have years of development before you're breaking ground even. So it is timely, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. It does take a lot of time, but we're trying to address it in a way that we get out in front of it and meet our customers in a way that we've already been developing. We're a year or so down the road, and then they need the site. So it's not like they're waiting the full 2 years or 3 years potentially of development.
I'm reminded, as we talk about this energy transition or electrification as well, there's so many different partners in the supply chain involved, and getting everyone to kind of meet up at the right time, having enough power, the transmission lines, right? Not only generation, transmission line, having the charging, your site ready to go, having the customer with the cars or the fleet has to be ready to go. Everything has to come together. That's a lot of moving parts.
Definitely. And I think on the front end, we're plagued with switchgear and the actual power equipment on site taking a long time. And I mean, there are extreme lead times based off the pandemic and these kind of supply chain issues we're still working through at large across all industries, around your chargers all the way to the power equipment. But what I think a lot of companies lose sight of is on the back end, you have to have a robust supply chain so that if things break, because they will, it's not an if, it's when, do you have the parts capacity to be able to repair and fix a problem on site pretty quickly? If you're at the mercy of the supply chain issues we're talking about, then you will not be able to ensure the reliability and uptime that these fleets need. And if you think about charging at large right now, you have folks that are pretty pessimistic about it because the reliability is abysmal at best. Like compared to fleet operations, I would say. So I've done the drive. I've driven from coast to coast in an electric vehicle before, and fortunately, I was able to make it. But there were times where I pulled up to charging stations, and out of 4 charging stations, 1 worked. If you're a fleet operator, you can't survive on only 25% of your fleet being able to charge and get back to work.
I didn't realize not only is it available, but is it up and running? I didn't realize that was a challenge as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, and many people don't.
Yeah, I think you just think it's kind of like the gas pump. You're gonna go, and most of the time the gas pump is working. Most of the time there is gas, but it's interesting to
Yeah.
hear that there's a high percentage of downtime, let's say, and so that goes back to what you were mentioning before, how the on-site kind of operations and maintenance is so important to uh, really electrification overall. Um, Volterra has released a playbook, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of touch on some highlights of that.
Yeah, definitely. So this is our first playbook in a series of 5, and ultimately the 5 playbooks will address a lot of our value proposition and how we tackle like the whole value chain of charging, but and infrastructure. But what we're doing is we're starting kind of on the front end and walking our customers and partners through that. So this first one is focused on real estate, specifically on site acquisition and power procurement. And what we are trying to highlight are some of the woes that we solve for. Some of the things we've already talked about in this call, but and then some. So we'll walk them through some of the biggest challenges that they're going to see out and about when they're trying to tackle this on their own. And part of it will be to educate them. Um, and then part of it will be to show our expertise. Just candidly, we want folks to understand why we even exist and how we can help. One thing I would call out is right now there's a term in the space, charging as a service, and another one would be fleet as a service. We're very different than that. So with charging as a service, you are responsible as a site host for putting charging in at your site, and in the way of developing the site, working with the contractor, and then the charging provider comes in and bolts down their charger and you pay a monthly fee. And typically your maintenance and some other services could be bundled in with that. Fleet as a service takes it a step further and actually will have the offsite facility, but your vehicle is bundled into it. And typically it's like a charging depot with vehicles that you're taking out and coming and going. We're different in that we will go out and we will develop a site, and then we will put the on-site amenities that the fleet needs on that site, and also sometimes additional services that they need on that site, and they can bring their own fleet. We're trying not to disrupt their operations as much as possible. Like they're coming and they're using the same vehicles they have in their fleet, um, and we manage the development. Right, so we go out and we work with the local authority having jurisdictions, which is AHJs is what we call it for short, as well as the utility. One, to go through the permitting process, which is highlighted a lot within this playbook, and then 2, to work through bringing that power to the site. So we're developing relationships across the country, either directly or through our network of partners that we're using to develop these sites. Um, and then I would say, like, is it charging as a service? Is it fleet as a service? No, we're working through what's the right way to call it. But in essence, it's infrastructure and operations as a service to the fleet. So we're trying to really take off a lot of that heavy burden of transitioning to an electric fleet, and kind of manage the operations on behalf of the fleet.
And just to clarify for our listeners, what a couple of the use cases I think you've mentioned, but you talked about autonomous vehicle fleets. It sounds
Yeah.
like maybe kind of the last mile, kind of, so like kind of from
Yeah.
that distribution to my home, or my Amazon, whatever home package. What
Yeah.
are some other use cases as well? Just so to clarify to listeners when they're thinking about this. You also mentioned the port as well.
Yeah. So kind of to go smallest to largest, like you mentioned the autonomous
Mm-hmm.
vehicle. So autonomous vehicle fleets are endemic. They're native to electric vehicles. And even though they've kind of gone through the phases of where they had to hodgepodge gas or hybrid vehicles with LiDAR and everything, they're at a point where their fleets are fully electric now and they're looking to scale. So they're a perfect kind of match made in heaven for our business model. And we're working with some now that are really giving us insights into those specific needs. So, for example, when I talk about amenities, like we know we have to bring a good amount of fiber to the site for them to have the data offloading capabilities that they need on a day in, day out basis. In addition to that, they may need a car wash. So those additional services may be, hey, you know what, we need to clean our sensors on these vehicles every day. So we need a car wash facility or a light car wash bay to be able to clean those sensors off. Kind of stepping up, one category that's near and dear to my heart would be the last mile delivery, because I'm working at Rivian, going to the Normal, Illinois plant. seeing the Rivian Prime van in its glory and coming off the production line, I just cannot wait to see them on the road. I actually talked to an Amazon driver at home a few weeks ago, and he saw I drive an R1T, a Rivian truck, and he saw it and he goes, "Do you know they make Amazon vans?" Like, he had no idea. I used to work for the company, but it was just really cool to hear this guy say, like, "Do you know they're making the Amazon vans? We have 5 at our facility already, and folks are starting to test them, and I can't wait to be able to drive one." So that's near and dear to my heart. But to get back on track, we'll service fleets with these electric vans. You've got, of course, I mentioned the Amazon, but a whole host of OEMs are now developing them. Daimler, again, used to work for Mercedes-Benz, so it's also near and dear. They just released their e-Sprinter for the US, so you'll start to see more of those, not just with Amazon, but all of these last mile delivery services. And then kind of moving up, you've got everything from box trucks to heavy duty fleets that we will serve. And by the port, that is what we call drayage, that category. So think taking a container straight from the port to an inland terminal. These fleets are making these really quick routes. The driving profile, it really is great for electric because they're not going these really long distances. You have some that may round trip go 20 miles. So just to be able to go pick up a container, go drop it off, and then keep going and doing that route works perfect for electric vehicles. And we're working with some fleets now. So I mentioned we're developing sites on the West Coast, but also on the East Coast too. And I think as far as the larger trucks, that category is gonna take off. And then I would say, like, the long-term mission for us is to serve zero emission vehicles. So we're hoping that kind of expands out into more short haul and long haul opportunities. But I'd say autonomous vehicles, last mile, drayage, those are the most promising right now. And then all of the additional fleets that are already transitioning to electric, whether it's like rental car fleets or fleet management companies, we're working with partners there. So those, think again, passenger cars, just not as cool as autonomous vehicles.
Something else I think about is if you're maybe, I guess, the availability of sites or land for this, especially if you're in let's say a metro area, but more urban area where there's maybe most of the land has already been purchased, bought up, being used for something else. But is that really an issue?
It definitely is, and it's making this industry competitive. I mean, I've been in charging for a while now, and over the past couple of years, I've seen the most growth, and it's almost exponential. It feels like every year more companies are getting into the space, and more investors are getting into the space. So we're happy to say that we're very well positioned, but that doesn't eliminate the competition. I think there's enough business for all of us to do really well, enough opportunity for us to all do really well, but it doesn't change the fact that if you want property by the port of Long Beach, there most of that property is already owned, and it's really hard to get prices for a site there that would be comparable to, let's say, a port on the East Coast, and like Houston or even Savannah or Miami. Like, it's just there's no comparison. The real estate costs are just much more. When you talk about, you mentioned in metro, like urban areas, when you talk about autonomous vehicle fleets, besides the characteristics of the fleet and the capabilities of those vehicles already, you have these limiters of, like, okay, if I have a 100 car fleet and I need to be in the middle of this city center, we're basically left with, we're going to electrify a garage. So now we have to build up. And that introduces even more challenges in development, not only of just bringing the power to the site and going up, but can the vehicles actually navigate it? And how do you build a site that makes it easier for them to navigate? So we're tackling some of those challenges for our customers right now.
It's really a fun challenge, I think, to think about, of how do you iterate all together with all the different partners in this supply chain. And yeah, you're iterating and co-creating to make this happen. Jonathan, I know we only have a few minutes left, but what are you looking forward to, or what do you have your eye on? Like, what's exciting? What are you excited about in this space?
Oh man, I mentioned that it's competitive, but I think it's like iron sharpens iron. I'm really excited about what not just we're doing here, but what you'll see probably a year from now across the space. One thing that was kind of core to the way we approach energy and charging at Rivian was a lot of the folks came from different parts of the industry, but we thought of it in a way of like, how do we make the industry better and not just our product better? And you still have a lot of those good stewards just all across, like spread out throughout the industry and kind of are multiplying. So we're looking at this technology stack in a way that hasn't really been done yet. But I know we're not the only ones that are doing it. So to give you a concrete example, a lot of folks think about just charging on site and how do you access the charger and make sure that the charger is running really well. We're thinking about that, but in addition to it, it's like, how do you manage all of the on-site operations? How do you connect that? How do you make all of these protocols that speak their own language connect into one hub, start to automate the site, but then also serve that up to the customer in a way that they can either connect through API and it integrates into their telematics, or it integrates into their fleet management system, and they have that comprehensive view of their operations. In a way, that is going to not only make the industry better, it's going to make these customers smarter, and ideally, it's going to make them adopt electric vehicles faster because they'll be able to have more visibility into it. And then maybe a second, that's more of kind of the macro. On the micro level, I think there are some really cool opportunities for these smaller fleets to start electrifying and engaging with companies like Voltera. And I can't imagine being a small business and trying to compete with some of these larger fleets, especially when you think about the capex burden of transitioning to electric. So with us coming out with these solutions, and it's not just us, the industry evolving and more solutions coming out, I cannot wait to see what this does for kind of the heart of America.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We'll link up the playbook so that listeners can dive into that if they want some more. And then, of course, we'll put Jonathan's LinkedIn as well. So if you want to connect and follow him. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. All right, have a great one.